Sonic Boom Episode 24, Fuzzy Puppy Buddies. Yes, this was an episode title in the Sonic franchise. I feel embarrassed just saying that title. This sounds like it'll be one of those episodes that only exemplifies why some Sonic fans hate this show. We start out with Amy playing with really little puppy figurines because she's a girl. She never played with these before. And then she celebrates. She probably entertains herself with this because Sonic won't go out with her. She says she's playing a sophisticated battle game with them called Fuzzy Puppies, and her friends naturally laugh. It is pretty cool that you can play a game by yourself. She's told that the next game is at a table with Dave and Facetious, and somehow Eggman's here as well, because even he thinks they're adorable. To be fair, he pet a Chow in the Sonic X comic book because it's cute, so there's some precedent for this. Then after that unusual moment for Robotnik, the heroes fight some robots just for Eggman to ask Amy to play another game with her later, dismissing his attempts at murdering her and her friends as just business. So he gets sent away after Amy agrees to play with him way too easily because I guess she's just that lonely without Sonic dating her, that she'd even agree to spend time with Dr. Eggman. She really needs a boyfriend. But this is refreshing. No other continuity of Sonic would do stuff like this all the time. It's part of the show's originality. There would be no value to a continuity without any kind of originality. She tells Eggman she's going to train him to be good at the game, because all he did was collect them. I mean, if he didn't become good at the game, then he wouldn't be good at keeping her company when she's lonely. And sure, she's got sticks, but I doubt she'd make good company with her paranoia. Tails is always engineering, and Knuckles just wants to spend all his time with Sonic in this show. So really she doesn't have any friends who will constantly spend alone time with her. She's talking too fast for me to type down all the rules she's blathering on. I'd do it if it was a comic, but the show sucks, so I don't care about constantly pausing the video just to get everything down. Something about how one of the dogs has a bark. I'm just wondering why Amy has too much pride to ask Tails to build her a companion robot to play the game with her. Among other things. I'd expect her to do that long before playing games with Eggman, and anywhere else that'd be considered a betrayal. Why doesn't she just ask Tails to make a robot that kinda looks like Sonic so she can have someone other than Eggman to spend time with? Eventually, after boring repetitiveness, Eggman masters it, and Knuckles says that it's been a really slow week. Six wonders if stuff's happening and they're not a part of it. Well, in any other continuity, she would probably be right. Eggman would be doing stuff in other parts of the world than just Sonic's village. So Eggman couldn't even get away with that in this continuity because Dix would wonder if he's up to something. But then Tails gets suspicious that Amy's up to something because Eggman only does stuff centered around them. Eggman shows up at Amy's and Sonic runs around him and ties him up with a blanket. Sonic says suspiciously that Eggman doesn't always knock before an attack, and Tails has a realistic, shocked reaction to Amy telling him the truth that she's being friends with Eggman. Then it turns out that Eggman and her are planning on going to a con dedicated to the game. I love how reluctant Sonic is to plan on going there. He sounds so embarrassed. And I love how his friends are annoyed too. You'd think Tails would offer to learn how to play the game with her so that she could play with someone other than Eggman, but I guess not. Do you think they'd be feeling guilty that she had to resort to being with him of all people? Eggman wastes too much time trying to offer to give someone a robot later for a puppy, and the mother of the baby lectures him that he knows nothing about children's safety just for her baby to be on something tall and precarious. Her name's Lady Walrus, but that's lazier of a name than Rotor Walrus. And then Zoe reveals she's into the game too because she's a girl. That doesn't really elaborate on her character. At least she has a hobby, but that's not good enough. Anyways, after the Lightning Bolt Society rolls some boulders for the heroes to dodge, the heroes go to Eggman, and if she wins the game against him, he'll have to give back the dog figurine he's holding. Despite the dramatic music, I can't be invested in the game. One, because I don't know the rules at all, and two, because the show is so predictable that I know Eggman's gonna lose. The writers would burst into tears if they let Eggman win even once. So why the hell are they dragging out her winning so much with their endless, mind-numbingly boring dialogue? Like, everyone knows the show has no real stakes, not even at something like this. It's patronizing of the audience. I don't care what redesign he has. No Robotnik would ever be caught dead doing this. Remember that Sonic short where Saturn Robotnik was furious at seeing how nice Sonic X Eggman was and sent the nuke to 4 kids? I want to see a version of that against this guy. AOSDH Robotnik would be calling him and telling him off, and I'd love to hear every line of that because this is so emasculating for Robotnik. Well, whatever. At least it's creative. Amy wins, and we learn that they're still playing the game together. That's how used she got to him trying to murder her. Logically, the only result of Amy going to play games with Eggman would be that she'd sit on a bomb and it'd blow her up. But this is Boom Eggman, who doesn't want to win. Also, I'd like to point out that there's some trivia with this episode that I learned on TV Tropes, because the special dog maneuver that Amy used, the dog was based on the late dog of Cindy Robinson, the voice actress for Amy. And she had a hard time recording the lines because she was so touched by the gesture, like because of the specific dog that she was using. This was an annoyingly silly episode where Amy and Eggman play games against each other involving figurines of puppies. Right away, this would never happen. I guess Eggman cares more about having fun than anything, even if that means being smart enough to overlook the superficial look of the game and enjoy it. And even if that means not setting a bomb for Amy in his base when he lures her there, because playing a game with her is worth ignoring that. So it does make logical sense, it's just confusing that Robotnik would ever start doing this just to collect them. So it's not even about the game at first, or he'd invent his own figurines. Like, it's obvious the show is just a parody of the Sonic franchise. And he's too ashamed to reveal he plays the game with Orbot and Cubot. But then why did he humiliate himself going to that con? That's a sudden shift from wanting to keep it a secret. He'd never play the game in front of people. I couldn't get invested in the game at all because Amy told me the rules so fast that none of them sank in, and I didn't really care. It's not like this is Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you'd see them playing the game with the rules a whole bunch of times. I know that Amy is the only one allowed to win at the end, so there's no reason for me to pay any attention to the moves, let alone write them down. That's the problem with predictability and gutlessness. If there's no real tension, why care? The dialogue's too boring to be worth it. You know what would be way more exciting? Seeing actual dogs moving around and fighting in the games. But no, then dogs would get hurt, so that'd go too far. But if they're just a simulation in a video game, then it wouldn't matter. But it'd still be way more interesting to watch because it involves stuff moving on its own, against other stuff. Not just Amy and Eggman moving figurines around to arbitrary positions, which is about as exciting as watching chess. Chess would make more sense for Eggman. The show is banking on silliness to be funny, but the kind of silliness I laughed at in Fleetway is the outlandish kind, not the stupid and embarrassing kind. Something outlandish is like an evil tailor making clothes with intelligent fabric that forced people to steal money for him. It sounds cartoonish, but if the plan went on too long and he had everyone under his control, he'd get rich and a lot of innocent people would be in trouble because of him. It'd be the end of the world economy. That's the kind of humor that made me laugh. Something outlandish is like if Eggman had a plan to turn the world's ocean to milk. It sounds silly, but eventually the milk would go sour, and milk can't water the plants. There's high stakes and deadly consequences, but it still sounds silly, so it's charming at the same time. That's silly done right, and this is silly done wrong, where the characters are completely out of character based on your experience with the entire franchise up to that point, and the entire plot only happens because of a plot hole. This show's appeal gets less and less the more continuities you've experienced before it, because they just make it obvious how wrong the show got these characters. At least Amy's not always a bitch, so when she's actually being nice in the show, I love the change. I mean, she's even being nice to Eggman. But she has had really bad days, and Eggman's pathetic. I'm too distracted by the confusion to find the silliness funny. There was nothing confusing about Fleetway's outlandish silliness. There was a time that a villain said, "Still don't think I'd amount to anything, Mum?" right in the middle of trying to attack the heroes. Or the time that everyone in a village all at the same time joined a cult to worship the moon goddess and try to burn Knuckles at the stake. So there's a tension there. And I'm trying not to laugh just talking about it, so there's the humor. Turns out they were all being brainwashed, so it wasn't forced at all. Most of the time I laughed at Fleetway, it was because of the sarcastic, snarky lines of the characters, which is the most natural humor of all. The characters are still snarky in this show, but even that's not good enough. I guess the snark is too weak for me to relate to. I said that being silly is charming because it's the kind of outlandish, anything can happen situation that the characters can get into because it's a sci-fi fantasy series. STC was taking full advantage of what genre it was in and the planet it was on. That's what I really loved about it in its humorous situations. It was reminding me of why I love Sonic. I look at stuff like Captain Plunder bragging about the ridiculous amount of ghosts he was chased by, and escaping from prison with Simpson the cat, and getting turned into a hippie. And best of all, how all of this cartoony stuff is being taken completely seriously as an everyday part of Mobius' life, which is the funniest part of all. We don't get that in Sonic Boom. We don't have mutant sharks here. When's the last time Styx got chased by a bunch of ghosts? If any of that happened in Sonic Boom, the characters would be snarking about how silly it is and taking me out of it, telling the audience that's not how the world is supposed to work, and that's annoying, like Charming bothering the Chaotix. The problem with Sonic Boom is that it isn't taking advantage of the fact that it's in the Sonic series nearly as much by making me smile and laugh at the kind of situations that being on Mobius ends up naturally leading to. Because most of the time, this show might as well be taking place on our planet. It's using our trends and bureaucrats. We'll have an episode about Facebook. That's not charming, that's boring. Amy and Eggman playing this game with each other was boring. I was given no information that sunk in, and I didn't care. This kind of plot could have been done by anybody. The point is, the show is stupid. I felt embarrassed just reading the title of this episode. And yet there's always a part of me that's excited to watch new episodes of the show. It's lucky that it has the Sonic characters in it. Episode 24-2, Designated Heroes. We start out with the Eggmobile shooting lasers at a toy and game factory. Somehow Orbot and Cubot are programmed to complain about this. It's very in character for Eggman to aim for this kind of factory. It takes advantage of him being childish. Eggman yells at them for talking in a covert operation because they might be discovered, as if he's scared of people discovering him. And after he vacuums up some candy, Sonic throws something at him. And Orbot says it's interesting to watch the two competitors fight, as him and Cubot commentate like sports people. They remember a time when Eggman planned on robbing the villagers of sources of funds, so that they'd be so desperate for fun that they'd play around in his amusement park. They do that anyways if this show's to go by. Styx puts some ball bots in a net, which the heroes make use of. And Tails shoots Eggman with white foam or something, using a projectile weapon connected to a hose. Sonic then stupidly decides to make things more fair by agreeing that only one of them will battle Eggman at a time. Then Eggman manipulates Amy into giving him her hammer, saying that he's got a recycling charity to help kids, and it'll be helpful for smashing the cans. Amy's desperate enough to believe him, and then Eggman manipulates Styx's paranoid beliefs, so he tricks her into giving him something of hers. I didn't actually catch how. The point is, it was way too easy for Eggman to trick someone paranoid. Styx is the last person in the universe who would let herself get tricked by him. Then Eggman expresses interest in Tails' invention, which restructures the humidity molecules in the air. I hate how smug Tails was acting when he said that. And somehow it runs on brain power, so Eggman says something smart to power it up, saying that complimenting someone will make him lower his guard. So he shoots him and paralyzes him in a blue force field, and taunts Knuckles. This is just about showing how pathetic all of Sonic's friends are that he can manipulate them. This is disheartening. After he does a staring contest with Knuckles while music plays, I'm really confused about this protracted, inexplicable joke when Tails says back to his shift, somehow unparalyzes himself, and logs into a shift. Huh? That's not funny, that's confusing. Granted, it's Eggman being competent, but he's only competent because everyone around him is ridiculously incompetent, so that's a cheat. Then Eggman somehow gets Knuckles to do a bunch of exercise stuff and bend a metal thing to show off his strength, and then tells him to dig a hole. Shouldn't it be obvious to him that he should never do what Eggman says? Sonic then laughs at his friends and calls them lame for getting tricked by Eggman. It's the writer who's lame for making them all get the idiot ball. Knuckles digs out of the ground to reunite with his friends, and he's somehow excited that he found dirt in the hole. Then Sonic goes to the hot desert for some reason. and arbitrarily wastes time making stupid noises because the people who make this show are complete idiots. Then he has a tea party with no one to talk to, because this writer has no idea what Sonic's actual character is. Even Flynn did this to him. His friends catch him and then leave, and Eggman catches him napping and traps him in a cage, and uses Tails' brain power invention to paralyze Sonic in a force field. His friends fortunately think to come back here somehow, as I wonder if the reason they all knew to come to this specific part of the desert twice was because Eggman told them he'd meet them there. Why do they waste time going to the places Eggman tells them to go to risk getting murdered by him? Amy gets her hammer out of a wheel sent at her by doing a flipping jump over it. That was way too easy for her, what a creator's pet. She gets pinned to a wall by a sharp object, and Six steals Eggman's hat to get Tails' invention back. And Knuckles says something to undo the effects of the brain power invention, but somehow runs on brain power. So Eggman gets sent to a cage, but then his friends betray him by trapping him with Eggman for no reason. Realistically, in any other continuity, this would end with Eggman killing Sonic in a one-on-one fight with him, since they're in too cramped a space for Sonic to take advantage of his speed. He could just snap his neck. But it's obvious by now that Boom Eggman doesn't actually want to kill Sonic and his friends in a way that's pathetically easy, so he wastes time singing the Bottle of Beer song instead. It's impressive that the censors let the word beer be mentioned in Sonic, at least. I don't remember even Archie referencing alcohol. This episode was about all Sonic's friends being made unbelievably, uncharacteristically stupid so that Eggman could trick them all to giving him stuff. Which eventually ends up with him stealing Tails' force field cage maker invention, which is somehow powered by people saying smart things. Wouldn't the definition of a smart thing to say be biased because it's only determined by what Tails thinks is smart? For example, Tails could have political views that others would disagree with, but his machine would detect it as smart anyways because he programmed it. That's a nitpick compared to the idiocy of Sonic's friends, who shouldn't have been tricked by him so easily. Knuckles and Six had no reason to do what he said because he's obviously just planning on benefiting from them if he's telling them to do something. If Six's whole character is that she's too paranoid, there's no way she'd ever be tricked and manipulated by Eggman. She'd just tell him to take off. If I remember correctly, he manipulated her by acting like he believed her conspiracy theory. But that'd be the first time anyone ever believed her. So wouldn't she be shocked and confused and suspicious, as a paranoid person would be? She wouldn't just assume nothing was wrong. If Knuckles wanted to show off his strength, he wouldn't waste time exercising. He'd just punch Eggman, repeatedly, or less violently lift him over his head. Because that'd obviously be a lot more cathartic since he's his enemy. It'd make more sense if Eggman just sent Orbot and Cubot to sneak around and steal Six's possession when she's not there, and Amy's hammer. And if Knuckles wasn't there, so we didn't have to tell him to dig, which he had no reason to do. At least I can kind of forgive Amy and Tails being manipulated. Amy's supposed to be idealistic. That's how she convinced Shadow and Gamma to become good guys. So naturally she wanted to believe Eggman really was going to use her hammer for charity, so she let herself believe it just in case. And plus this is Boom Eggman, the least evil one of them all. And the fact that he asked her to keep his charity a secret for the sake of his villain reputation made his lie more believable because he acknowledged why his lie sounded unbelievable for someone like him. As for Tails, he's excited about his invention and eager to talk about it, so naturally he got distracted when Eggman expressed interest in his device. And he doesn't have anybody else to talk to at length about his inventions because he's not friends with any other geniuses. So that's why he settled for Eggman instead of just telling him to take off and talking to Rotor instead. There is no Rotor, at least not in the village. It's not like Eggman steals his inventions every day, so he was so happy to talk about his hobby that he didn't think about what his intentions were. And while I wanted someone to punch him in the face every second he was acting smug about it, I relaxed when he genuinely smiled like an excited little kid. I just wish he actually looked like a kid. AOSDH Tails had the short, cute appearance Tails is supposed to have, even if the color was wrong. While with Boom Tails, he looks like a teenager, not a cute kid, which misses half his appeal. Sure, he's a little shorter, but teens can be short too. The game's Tails had the same problem. The beginning of the episode revealed that Eggman's ultimate plan was to rob the villagers of sources of fun like candy, until they become sad, dry husks, desperate enough to go to his new amusement park. The problem is, well, one, the subplot is immediately forgotten about by the writer, so there goes that plot thread. And two, it's not self-aware of the show because there's been times where Eggman's thrown a party or event and the villagers willingly went there. He didn't need to rob that factory to give them extra incentive if they're gutsy and trusting enough to go to an event he hosted. In the Boom comic, they went to his Oktoberfest no problem. So why did he feel the need to justify robbing a toy factory with that excuse instead of just saying he wants toys? And why did Cuba even ask why and complain about it when he's built by Eggman? It was interesting to see Six capture the Ballbots in a net, but why didn't they just shoot lasers to get out of it? I guess they were too damaged. Why don't they get in trouble for making the Ballbots look too much like the balls from Portal? The story eventually ends with Sonic getting trapped in a cage because Eggman showed up late when he was napping. And after an interesting fight scene for once, where Knuckles turns off the brain power machine by saying the first thing that comes to his mind, Eggman gets trapped instead. And then Sonic's friends betray him by trapping him with Eggman. But there's not going to be any consequences to that for a satisfying ending, like them all tripping and falling in the mud. Knuckles has to have been saying that stupid thing on purpose, because while he was just told to say the first thing on his mind, it was obvious from the context that he was needed to say something stupid to turn off the brain power device. And no sane person would actually think Eggman's mustache was spaghetti, because it doesn't look like that at all, and spaghetti can't grow. Knuckles wouldn't be intentionally trying to say something smart at that point, because it was obvious from the context that if someone with a brain power device in their head said something smart, the force field would have stayed on, and that wasn't what the heroes wanted. He doesn't want to inconvenience his friends in the fight, so he'd have no reason to be trying to say something he thinks is smart at a time like that. Plus, he built a functioning wooden robot. So this proves that Knuckles is very capable of coming up with stupid things to say on purpose, and he's willing to do it too. You can tell because he's smiling while saying this without being embarrassed at all. He doesn't even care enough to correct himself afterwards and clarify they didn't actually think that. So since he's not embarrassed about saying things he knows are stupid, maybe it's in his nature to say stupid stuff on purpose to amuse his friends. Or maybe the writing just sucks.